The put this on there, please. So we'll be able to review pretty much everything we need to review tonight because we've done everything. The only thing that you might not have done when you left, if you left early, was there was this thing about pH. Are looking for metabolic acidosis, alkalosis, etc. That's this chart on your PowerPoint that I really want us to be able to know how to do, that I'm going to go over. But really, I think what I'd like to do is start on those last two parts then, which are really, because that's sort of, what's a lot of the test is that playing that game, and we did all do that, but I want to make sure that we play that again. Some people are already playing it. So we're going to go ahead and start kind of at the end, and then sort of maybe work our way backwards. And so we'll have time before, as long as you're staying, to go over the hemoglobin saturation curves, and you can't forget the respiratory system. We kind of have forgotten it a bit, but we can't forget. And you'll see, we'll go over what we need to know from Chapter 19 as well, which is minimal. So most of this stuff is Chapter 20 and what we've done with it, right? That's a huge part. Before, again, my voice, I am sort of semi-sick, so I'll try to not kill myself, and I've got as many drugs as I can find here, so I might be going. Are there any questions about anything, besides what to do, or like any overall question? I forgot to bring your Scantrons in today. I'll bring them in, especially if you remind me as far as the lab quiz goes, if you want to see what you missed. Again, a lot of people got 100. Most people did really well. I guess the one question people missed is just because it was on the lab, the lab exercise one. And so what a lot of people missed is there, but I mean, is the fact, let me just kind of put it here, because that's what, if you missed one question, that's probably the one you missed. There was this idea of steady state. Okay, and the idea is, this is sort of our oxygen consumption, that if you're going at a certain rate, you need a certain amount of oxygen, but it takes time, you can't rev up to 100 right away, right? It takes time to get to that level. And so that in-between level, in which you need to figure out a way to get that energy, is basically, your oxygen deficit. Because at time 0, if you're running at that pace, you need that much, but you don't have that much. And you've got to rely upon glycolysis and all that other stuff. So that's your oxygen deficit. Now, if you train, what happens is you get there faster. So you have less oxygen deficit. So I forgot what it was, but it was, you reach steady state faster, and you have decreased, oxygen deficit. That was the right answer. So some people miss that. Okay, but it was in the lab. It's on the end there. But hey, one question. Most people got everything else.
So the answer would have been a more rapid steady rate, not a more gradual steady rate.
Yes, because you reach there faster. Gradual would mean slower. This way, you're going to reach. It's like the car will rev up faster. You get to the steady state faster than you would without
I
it.
guess the word rapid was confusing because I was thinking breaths or rapid breaths.
We're not breathing. Well, and it was pretty much from those words from the handout as well. It basically says that. Anyway, that's that. But I can bring those in. All right, so we'll play the game. Let me do the other thing that just talking about respiratory and metabolic acidosis, alkalosis, of how to really diagnose it. And we'll put our famous equation up that we keep saying. Now we're seeing it a lot in action. So the chart that's on your PowerPoint, and I'm going to show you that it's really, I wouldn't memorize the chart. I would try to use some clues, which I'm giving to figure it out. If you're actually trying to diagnose a patient, what they're looking at, I guess we'll start here, when they're looking to see what you have, they monitor 3 things. They're monitoring hydrogen levels, which is pH. Okay, you have acidosis, alkalosis. But they also monitor CO2 levels. You know, they're not really looking at respiration per se, CO2 levels. And something I didn't talk about earlier, because I was waiting, they do measure, we care about bicarbonate levels, and we've ignored that. Those three factors are going to determine basically what you have. And sort of the chart here, which we're going to see, you don't really want to memorize it, but this is sort of a flow chart for it, is let's say you have, again, a patient. Let me put it over here. Well, the first thing to do that would be easy is, you know, in one case, you might have a low pH, which means what? High hydrogen. And the other overall idea, you'll have high pH, which will be low hydrogen. Plus. So again, in this case, you have what? Acidosis. So we know it's acidosis. And in this case, we know it's alkalosis. But in both cases, we want to know, you know, and we'll be able to tell by those other ones whether it's respiratory acidosis or metabolic acidosis, whether it's respiratory alkalosis or metabolic alkalosis. And so for these, you know, and I'm going to put this right now before we put the arrows, we want to know what's going to determine is the following: CO2 and bicarbonate, what they look like. That's why once you know that, you're going to be able to diagnose, you know, it right away, unless you have some what they call mixed condition. So right now we'll just put them down here, because those that we've already got the hydrogen taken care of. We'll put CO2 and bicarbonate for all three of these and see which way they go. So does everybody understand what I'm doing so far? Again, for the patient, we're going to look at all three of these values, and kind of based upon this rubric, we're going to know what it is out of those four things we talked about. And obviously the first one's pretty easy. Now, here's the key. Again, without memorizing what these arrows will be down there, the key, there's a couple keys. One key is that, and this is usually when I'm starting, because I don't memorize this stuff too, the respiratory ones of both of these will make sense based upon the law of mass action that we did earlier, and we're going to show you. Okay? So let's do those first. Those are going to make sense. And so if you look at, and we'll do both of them. Let's do the acidosis one. So what's going to cause respiratory acidosis? What kind of ventilation? Okay? So we're going to do this, and you're going to see just like we did before, okay? But with one thing. If we hypoventilate, we're going to do the same thing. Respiratory, we start on this side. So if we hypoventilate, one, what do we say next? We increase CO2, right? We already have one of those then. And then if we increase CO2, law of mass action does what? Remember, if you have too much of this, it shifts to the right. Okay? And then what did we say before? So law of mass action. We say it increased hydrogen, right? Okay? That lowered pH, and we call that respiratory acidosis. But if you're going this direction, you're increasing this. We didn't talk about this, but what are we doing to it? Right? You don't just increase one product. If you go this direction, you're increasing both. So we have the answer. For if we have, you go on this side, we know it's acidosis, right? Because it's high hydrogen. And now we know for respiratory, we have high CO2 and high bicarbonate. Does that make sense? The respiratory ones, all you have to do is, you know, instead of, you do exactly what we did before, but you take into account bicarbonate. Okay? And again, they are going to go together, right? Because if we're going on that side, you know, again, if we just do this again, let me actually finish this. So, law of mass action said we go that way, that increased hydrogen, which is up there, that lowers pH, and that makes it respiratory. Respiratory caused it. Respiratory acidosis. Acidosis. But of course, we know that, but we didn't. The patient, patient is coming in with these levels. We're trying to figure it out. The way it's going to be consistent is that we also are increasing bicarbonate. So remember, if a patient comes in, you don't know what's going on. Okay, they don't have their little flow chart for you for what caused what. But we're going to see as we go through this that basically, if you monitor pH and it's high, it's a low pH, it's high hydrogen, and you determine that their CO2 and bicarbonate are both above normal, you'll be able to diagnose it as respiratory acidosis. Okay, and are you sure? Well, we'll do the others and we'll show you. Okay, does that make sense?
Bicarbonate is a buffer, right?
Yeah.
Well, I know that in between that reaction is carbonic acid. Is that the acid that's making
No, because as carbonic acid, an acid obviously by definition donates hydrogen solution. When it's carbonic acid, it's actually not. It's when it dissociates. That's why I sort of skip it. When it dissociates into this and this is what's creating the acid part. Then, as a buffer, bicarbonate will combine with this, and then when pH is going down, and then go ahead and produce the carbonic acid. So you have like that's the conjugate acid, and that's the conjugate base basically on this. So, but we're going to deal with it being a buffer in a second as well. But the idea is, and that's the idea too, that overall, that when you're forming acidosis, you are causing this to shift and causing the dissociation of carbonic acid, putting this in solution. Okay? I don't know if that fully answered. Well, I don't know what you're asking.
Because I'm looking at HCl3 as a buffer.
Well, it's a buffer, and we're going to show you a buffer when we add hydrogen into it. But the idea is, we have this idea of buffers going both directions. And the idea is, if we're pushing in that direction, we are going to convert the bicarbonate, okay, so into, which is this being the acid. You have an acid and a conjugate base, right? If this is the acid, okay, this is no longer, this is dissociated, this is dissociated. This is actually, free hydrogen lowering the pH, okay? If we add bicarbonate to it, we can actually reverse it, and we're actually going to show that. If you do the opposite, let's just do, again, the respiratory ones go straight forward. We do the respiratory ones. So if we hyperventilate, okay, hyperventilate, okay, we do the opposite. We do what? We lower CO2. That causes what? That causes both of those to go down. Okay. Right? So we lowered this. Law of mass action took us all the way that way. Therefore, we converted both of these into that. Okay? So the idea was that, of course, lower hydrogen means higher pH. Respiratory caused it. So it's respiratory alkalosis. But the key for that chart, because again, you don't know they hyperventilated, but you will be able to measure these three values. Okay? Here's our low hydrogen. For our respiratory, both of these are low. And so for the respiratory parts of these, again, you don't have to do all these for me, okay? They're going to multiple choice questions, but they'll follow the law of mass action. If you're not, because memorizing charts, I think, are crazy, okay? And the metabolic, I'm going to show you what happens. But for the respiratory ones, if you just add bicarbonate to the mix of what we did before, you're going to get the right answer. Okay? Now, to do the metabolic, there's going to be a couple of tricks. Okay? One trick, well, let's just do it. And I'll show you the trick. We'll come over here. Remember, metabolic is starting on this side. And all we talked about was changing hydrogen levels, right? Increasing or decreasing. But here's sort of the clue, or here's the first thing we've got to know, because Everything's involving bicarbonate now. Let's say we're going to, if you increase the amount of hydrogen going into the blood, you know, we talked about exercise and all that. That caused what? pH to drop, and we call that what? Metabolic acidosis. So here's the key. Two keys. That you know, to get, you know, for both of these, acidosis and alkalosis metabolically, bicarbonate is going the opposite way. If you have acidosis, okay, this partly relates to this idea of what you talk about being a buffer. You can have acidosis by having too much hydrogen, or, which we just haven't talked about in detail, the loss of bicarbonate, because you're losing that buffer. And the kidney, and there's other places where you can actually lose bicarbonate. If you lose bicarbonate, you're going to have metabolic acidosis. You don't have the same buffering capacity. And that's why, basically, for metabolic, these metabolic ones, you automatically do that. Okay? And the other way, we'll do the other one, right? They're always going to be in opposition. And already you have an idea of what's going on here. So you already know, okay? You already know this one, right? Metabolic acidosis, we just said low bicarbonate, right? Because acidosis is representing high hydrogen, low bicarbonate, okay? And as we have here, high hydrogen, low bicarbonate. Now, here's the deal, and here's where you're not going to even have to do this, okay? But let's just follow this. If we did what we did before, law of mass action, okay? And we're just looking at the hydrogen now. We increased hydrogen. Law of mass action takes us where? Okay? We're looking at the hydrogen. We've increased it. We're going to go to the left, right? Okay? Is that right? Get rid of this thing. You've increased hydrogen. You've gone to this way. Therefore, CO2 goes which direction? And who responds? Respiratory. And you have too much CO2, respiration is going to do what? Increase. The key, and this is when you look at the chart in red, the key is the respiratory system is so good at counteracting this. Instead of high CO2, guess what the patient's going to have? This is why the metabolic is also, it has that one extra step that doesn't fit the law of mass action. Because if we stay at law of mass action, we'd say low bicarbonate, high CO2. But it's not the case at all. The respiratory, on the metabolic ones, the respiratory always responds to actually reverse it. So in this case, you have this. Okay, good news. Good news is that, and we haven't finished this one yet, we'll do it, that the other trick here, besides, you have two tricks here. Okay, the respiratory fits. One trick is to realize that. Okay? The other trick is CO2 and bicarbonate always go the same direction. Okay, let me say that one more time, because then you can see you can actually stop right here unless you want to confirm it. Every time, we'll do the other one, because that's sort of a real big balance that we have in our body. You know, there's actually a lot of bicarbonate we play with. That in every case, and we've done 3 of the cases, whatever the CO2 is doing, the bicarbonate is doing as well. Okay? The respiratory ones, they sort of made sense. And this one, the only way it makes sense is because of this reaction of the respiratory system responding so much. Okay? So if we did the 4th one, which was like vomiting, let's vomit. Okay? Vomit, again, what did we do? We lost hydrogen, but that means what?
You increase pH.
That means that pH goes up, and we have alkalosis. We have metabolic alkalosis. Okay? But what else do we put in parentheses here? We increase bicarbonate. So don't we already know the answer? If we increase bicarbonate, what happens to CO2? Because of our little trick, and we'll show you. So once you get one of these, to be honest, you can get the others. Okay? Again, if we just do it, if we just go ahead and do it to show you, and we play the law of mass action, if we decreased, okay, just play it up here. We said we decreased hydrogen, so law of mass action goes this way. CO2 levels go, if we're going this way, which way do CO2 levels go?
Down.
Okay, CO2 levels go down, but who's going to respond?
Respiratory.
And the respiratory is going to decrease respiration. The end result is what?
Increase.
So, but you know, it's not an essay question. You're not going to have to work out all these steps. All you need to do, and I'll tell you the two types of questions, is to remember this scenario. Again, I think it's really hard to memorize this. I can't memorize this, right? And you're going to get it wrong. So again, here's some clues of how to do it. And one of the big points is that all these go together. Okay? You know, this is obviously easy if you have alkalosis or acidosis, the hydrogen levels. But these will always go together. Whatever direction one's going, the other one's going as well. Okay? Yeah.
At the beginning of the ramen, you lowered hydrogen and that raised bicarbonate. Why does that raise bicarbonate?
It's at a different balance. Okay, basically you're changing the balance of the buffer to the hydrogen, basically. And again, we haven't, you know, the kidney controls bicarbonate excretion and all that too that we haven't dealt with. Bicarbonate's pretty important for us, really. We just haven't dealt with all of it. That's why, because you've changed the balance. The other way, though, is you could cause alkalosis by something causing us having too much bicarbonate. So both of those actually can cause the same thing. But the idea is when you do either of them, the balance has been shifted. Because, again, this was the idea that bicarbonate is acting as a buffer with the hydrogen, so that you're not changing the pH at that point. If you change either of those, you're changing that balance. And so that's why we didn't deal with it at the beginning, because we had enough to deal with before. But really, and again, this is, unless the book's wrong, this other book I used, I don't know in real life, but this is sort of clinically how you would determine, because you don't know all this, what's going on. They hyperventilated them this. All you have is that you determine their hydrogen levels, their carbon dioxide levels, and the bicarbonate, and based upon this matrix, you can determine which one it is, basically. So this takes practice. Now the two types of questions are going to be, I'll give you something like, you have, patient has metabolic acidosis. Therefore, you would expect, and we have A, B, C, D, I'll have, hydrogen, CO2, bicarbonate, up, up, down, 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 up, whatever that is. You're going to have to determine the correct number, what this corresponds to, like we just did. For respiratory, it would be high hydrogen, or what did I get, metabolic acidosis? The answer would have been high hydrogen, low CO2, and low bicarbonate. So, again, hey, you guys are great at memorizing that. If you want to memorize that, go for it. I just couldn't do it. But I would probably try to figure it out in your head. The other aspect is, I will give you something like, the patient has low hydrogen, low bicarbonate, low CO2, and then A, B, C, D is, do they have metabolic acidosis, respiratory, etc. And so what do they have? Low hydrogen, low
Respiratory
CO2,
alkalosis.
respiratory alkalosis. So two questions. Those are the two questions. I mean, not with these particular ideas. Those are the two multiple choice questions you're going to ask. I'll give you condition, and then the answers are these combinations. I'll give you combination, and you've got to tell me which of those four conditions. So, yeah, not the easiest questions, but if you play with it, I think a few times now, hopefully that you're going to understand it. Does that make sense to people? Okay, besides that, you've got to actually play with it. Again, the key is the respiratory one just fits what we've been doing. You just add the bicarbonate. The other one, actually, as long as you remember, that's why, even if you don't want to go, I mean, the real key is the respiratory is overcompensating. I think that's good to know. But as soon as you determine this, you already have the CO2. You can stop, okay, if you believe that. Once you determine that it was metabolic acidosis or alkalosis, with the hydrogen, you have the bicarbonate, the CO2 is exactly the same. So it's sort of a shortcut, okay, when it comes down to it. Any questions? So 4 points. Plus clinically significant, right? This is how they will determine if you have one of those four. So it's sort of a good thing.
Can we do the essay question?
Well, I'm not gonna do the essay question because the essay question is just writing all that down.
Oh, this is it?
No.
What is it?
The essay question is what? What's the essay question?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
The renin, angiotensin, aldosterone pathway.
I'm looking at like
Sure, let's do it. Okay, we have the liver produces what? Produces the zymogen, angiotensinogen. Okay, is angiotensinogen active?
No.
No, it's a zymogen. We need something to trigger it. What's going to actually trigger it?
Low blood pressure.
And low blood pressure is triggering, is who's going to react to low blood
The
pressure?
granular cells in the kidney.
The granular cells of the kidney producing what? Producing renin. Renin is going to convert angiotensinogen to
One. Angie one.
Ang1, which is fine. Okay, Ang1 is not very active. We need what? ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme, which has been made by the blood, endothelial cells, blood vessels, basically. ACE converts it to what? Angiotensin 2. This is the active guy. You don't need the cardiovascular side of it. All you need is the following. We are going to the two places that we care about for hormones. One place is the hypothalamus. I'm just going to write hypo right now. The other one is the
Adrenal cortex.
adrenal cortex. So we have the areas here. The hypothalamus, it's going to trigger what? Increase in ADH, which means what to us? Water reabsorption. Okay? The adrenal is going to increase what? Aldosterone, which means what to us?
Increased sodium reabsorption.
And
Increased blood pressure.
H2O follow. Therefore, we have increased blood pressure to counteract this low blood pressure. 10 points. That's it. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. Okay? Try to spell this pretty close. Okay? If I have angio or, if you skip one letter because I'm not big, that's fine. But I need that inogen. I need you to realize that because these guys are pretty easy. You could just put Ang1, ACE, Ang2, all that stuff there. But I do need all that. You can put ADH and ALD. I know you know what it is. Yeah.
And there isn't any other form of it in the sense like high blood pressure might just stop at the top, right?
High blood pressure won't trigger this.
Right.
Yeah, because the trigger is this. And remember, we always have certain levels of all this, but high blood pressure is going to trigger ANP to come, if you remember that from the other chart. High blood pressure will trigger an increase of atrial natriuretic peptide, which will go to these two places and lower those.
Right.
Right.
But so for this, it's straightforward.
Yeah. That's all I want. I don't want anything else. There's no critical thinking. There's no anything
I
else.
just
It's
have to
simply
know like other version of it, like
No.
the opposite. Yeah.
No. This is it. I know people don't trust me now. On the essays, you should trust me. I'm pretty much upset with the essays hard. I haven't really got them. The multiple choice are the harder ones in general. But if you understand the game we're going to play, it won't be as hard as the last time. Okay, that's one of them. And one of the others is I think the only other one, and I can't remember exactly if I said, but basically the other one's easy too, like 6 or 8 points. There's going to be like 16, 18 points of essay, but the other one is simply, basically draw and label the parts of the nephron, okay? And I might say blood supply, and then tell me the osmolarities in each segment. So, bulbous capsule, proximal tubule, descending, ascending, distal tubule, collecting duct. What do we start out at?
300.
At the end of here. Okay, the bottom here.
600.
At the bottom.
12.
Then up at the top.
9. Oh,
9.
100.
It's and then over here. And then at the bottom. 50 to 1200. And again, if I put the blood vessels, I can't remember if I did, it's what? This is the afferent, this is the glomerulus, this is the efferent, and peritubular. Okay? You don't have to tell me what happens in each segment. You don't have to tell me anything else about it. You simply label that like it says, and boom, you've got those points. Because all the questions about it will be somewhere in the middle. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I don't even care if you put 600 in the middle, right? I really just care 300, 12. I mean, if you want to put the things, that's fine. I just care about these values here.
Efferent's on top, right?
Efferent's on top. Afferent's coming in, glomerulus, efferent, paratubular capillaries, or something like that. If I asked the blood vessels. I can't remember if I did. You don't have to put the osmolarity of the blood vessels. You don't have to throw vasorecta, countercurrent, because all those questions will come as multiple choice. So everyone should get whatever that is, whether it's 16 or 18 points. That's like, that's my Thanksgiving gift. Okay, as long as you're here. Okay, you're not. It's not. Don't overthink it. I'm not asking you for anything else. Okay, I'm literally just want that. Okay, we did your essay question. Okay,
Thanks.
now. So let's do the game, because that's what I want to make sure you understand. And again, we did that. And we'll go ahead and keep this guy up. But the first thing you want to have, and again, the way I'll do this, the trouble, the idea of scratch paper has been, and I think I just included, has been, well, I have to make sure people don't come in, I have to make people don't leave with the scratch paper, because, you can write test questions, I reuse questions, how I am with this. So that's why I've avoided it. So this time what I did is, I've included basically a whole page scratch paper, okay? It should be right, yeah. That says scratch paper on it. You can put your name on it, and make sure you include it with your test. Even if you happen to tear it off, put it in, okay? That's going to be your scratch paper. Because it's nice to have it maybe separate, because you don't want to keep going back and forth and not throwing it small. Yeah?
As far as the respiratory formulas, are we going to have to just memorize all of those?
Yeah.
Or are there any of them need to be like on the test?
You have to memorize all of them. So, again, the only thing that's not going to be on the test is Dalton's, right? I'm not going to put this pressure, partial pressure one. But I think I have almost one of every other one, just like you did on the others. So, yeah, you do have to memorize those. So the key diagram is this. Excuse me. There are these are the intercalated cells and the principal cells, and what they basically do. And so again, we'll put type A intercalated, type B. These are the principal cells. And again, always have to remember your orientation. This direction means reabsorbed into the blood. This direction is secreted / excreted, in the lumen and out. Okay, that's that direction, or else you'll get confused. All right. Remember, the type A and type B, they respond to acidosis and alkalosis. Type A respond to acidosis. So you got to remember that. And then the key is, in fact, I might not even put the whole equation, that they have, both of those cell types have this, carbonic anhydrase has this reaction going, and the key is the products will go different direction. So we're just going to write the products here. So, if you're responding to acidosis, one of these gets reabsorbed, one gets secreted. Which one gets reabsorbed? And we'll get rid of the hydrogen. We'll add potassium in a minute. Right? If you have acidosis, you want to get rid of acid. And correspondingly, you want to buffer by putting bicarbonate. So that makes sense. The opposite. If you have alkalosis, we don't have enough hydrogen, now we do, and we secrete bicarbonate. Now, if life were that simple, we'd be done. But now comes the idea that all three of these, again, for principal cells, they respond to what hormone? Aldosterone. Okay? And in response to aldosterone, they're going to reabsorb sodium and therefore water. So the reason we have all three of these up is because in addition to responding to acid-base, in addition to responding to blood pressure problems, they both are helping to control potassium. Okay, it's not a byproduct here. You know, we want to control potassium levels, and the kidney controls it. This is one way that these control it. So you have to remember which way potassium goes. And potassium always follows, for the intercalated cells, bicarbonate, which makes sense a little bit because potassium has a positive charge and bicarbonate has negative. For the principal cells, if we're reabsorbing sodium, what are we doing to potassium? Excreting it. So there. That's what you've got to, in order to do these problems, unless you have this somewhere in your head, you want to just redraw that and use that to answer these problems. And of course, by now you know this, so that actually helps. I mean, I would imagine you know this by now for everything. When we do these problems, first of all, they're going to be multiple choice, like we did on that last page of the extra questions. So it's not an essay at all. And so right now we're going to do it like an essay, because that's probably what you'll do on the side or your paper. But the answers we're going to guide you through as far as what you need. Remember, when we're doing this, we're involving, this is the peak of the course, I think. We're involving 4 different things, and we're always going to involve them once. We're going to do something with blood pressure, something with potassium levels, something with acid base, and the respiratory. So we're basically always going to involve one of those. Involve each of them once. Now, depending on where we start is where each of them will start to play, where they're going to come in. And it's one of those things where if you just practice these, you should be able to do well on this test. Remember, and again, I shouldn't keep saying it because it's sort of scary to people, I guess, but while we're doing this, because they're multiple choice, there's if you mess up right at the beginning, you call it hyperkalemia when it's hypo or something like that, you're gonna and you kind of understand the system, you're gonna start messing like 3 or 4 multiple choice in a row. So that's why you just want to be confident that you're able to do these. Okay? So we could start with any of these, and then again, it doesn't really matter which one we start with, because I don't really care. We can have any of those things. High, low, high, low, high, low, high, low. What do you want to do?
High potassium.
Okay? High potassium. So we're going to start with hyperkalemia. Okay? So where are you going? Not to the bathroom. Okay? What do you if we were an essay question and we were going on the facts, where would you go? Okay, we're going to go over here, right? And when it comes down to it, there are going to be, there's 2 ways to go. Both of these are going to respond to potassium levels. Remember, only one of these. You're not going to get both intercalated cells going and doing that. One of these, but also that the principal cells are always going to respond to potassium as well. That's why I sort of put them as a branch. But again, it's not an essay. So let's do this one first. If we have hyperkalemia, what do we want to do? Keep potassium or lose it? So who's going to help us lose it? Type B. Okay, we're not going to turn this off. We're going to use this. So again, just in your notes, you say, okay, type B are going to respond. And you look at your notes and see what they're going to do. Okay, we're going to excrete potassium to take care of that problem. Okay, to take care of that. But at the same time we're excreting potassium, what are we doing? We're reabsorbing hydrogen / losing bicarbonate. And what does that cause? Metabolic acidosis, correct? Okay, so we write that. Okay, so we have metabolic acidosis. what else is gonna happen there? So, remember, the other system that responds to acidosis, there's the kidney and the respiratory system. So, here we haven't done a respiratory yet, but the respiratory system's gonna respond, and it's gonna do what? Let's blow it out. Increase respiration. Okay, and we're done with that column. Okay, so we've involved, potassium, we've involved acid base, and we've involved respiration. But we got to come over here. Now, again, we have this idea. Where are we? We're hyperkalemia. What do we want to do with the potassium?
Lose it.
So what do we want? Aldosterone to go up or down? Up, because the picture we're drawing is an increase in aldosterone. If we have a decrease, the net effect will be to reverse it, right? And so, but right now we want to get rid of it. So we're going to increase aldosterone, and you just write what it does. It's going to, excrete potassium to take care of the problem. That takes care of that. But what else is it doing? Reabsorbing maybe an excess amount of sodium in water, potentially causing high blood pressure. So, we have what? Potassium. We have acid base. We have respiratory. We have blood pressure. Okay? We're always, sometimes it might even you put that at the top. You're always going to involve one, these ones, basically, right? And they're all involved, and you can start to see how they're interrelated now. Okay? So it's not something you can memorize. I think you just play with it. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay? And so, in a sense, there's only, I guess there's like 2, 4, maybe like 8 types of things to be encompassed as metabolic, okay? Because this would be hyperventilation if we start with that. There's 8 types of things. Now, again, if you look at the questions, it might be, a person has hyperkalemia, therefore I will have type A respond doing this, type B respond doing this, and I'll put the opposite thing on that. Type A, you know how these questions go, right? I'll have type A respond, for 2 of them, type B respond, and I'll put, it will, reabsorb potassium versus secrete, right? So you'll have the right answer here, you pick the right choice. In response to that, it may have caused respiratory acidosis, blah, blah, I'll have those 4, and it would be metabolic acidosis, okay? To correct that, the respiration will go, up or down. In this case, it's up. So that's how the questions will be. The answers are right here, but you just follow the questions. That's why, get this right, okay? Start from the beginning and get it right, okay? Let's do a couple more, because this is, again, then we can start reviewing back. Yes? You want to hypoventilate. Let's hypoventilate. Remember, this was a money-back guarantee, that you would get this. I don't owe any money, do I? Okay? So, because I know everyone gets this. It just, on a test, maybe we get nervous or something, but this is sort of important. So, hypoventilate. After Thanksgiving, the course is like, oh, well, whatever. It's not as exciting. But hypoventilate, so now it's nice to look at this while we're doing this. Hypoventilating, we're doing what? Okay, we're increasing CO2. We're holding our breath. Okay, and therefore, again, without even, you can do it in your head. If you're increasing CO2, you're going to increase what? And that's doing what? So basically, all this is respiratory acidosis. Okay? And there'll be some questions like that. That's like one question like isolated. Hypoventilation calls, and I'll have those 4 choices. Respiratory acidosis is the right one, right? So sometimes there'll be a couple just isolated. But now we're going to play the game. And so what's our first step here? Once we determine it was respiratory acidosis.
You need to get rid of the hydrogen so you see which one gets that.
And, right? Acidosis, type A respond. So we write that. Type A respond, and what is it doing? It's getting rid of, to take care of the acidosis, but what is it doing? it's reabsorbing potassium and bicarbonate. Again, the bicarbonate just works with this to restore pH balance. But we reabsorb potassium, therefore potentially causing hyperkalemia. What next?
I need to get rid of potassium.
Where are we going? Principal cells. So remember, we've already involved one of these. Check. So now the other cell type are always going to involve, because you're always involving one of the, both of these when we're doing this, is going to be the principal cells, because it's also controlling potassium. And now it notices again that we have too much potassium, and so the next thing to think about is aldosterone levels going up or down. Up, because just like we just did before, we want to get rid of the potassium. So we have, this will be finishing about the same. We increase aldosterone, that gets rid of, excretes potassium to take care of that problem, but you are reabsorbing sodium and water, therefore potentially increasing blood pressure. So, we got blood pressure involved. We've got potassium levels involved. We've got acid base involved, or well, here, and the respiratory system involved.
Do you want us to think about the urinary output?
Well, we can do that. Usually with the urinary output, which could be part of it, is when we are sort of doing the opposite. Because in that case, you're going to decrease urine output. But I usually care about, and again, I've mentioned this, and I will just do one too. You have a great nephron. You actually have a handout on diuretics that you don't need to memorize. It's for really your information only. But I had sort of compiled it because I was interested in diuretics myself. And the idea of all diuretics are that the basic idea we keep talking about with if you want water to go to one place versus another in a compartment, you basically put stuff there and water follows. Okay? If glucose comes out, glucose urea will cause, basically it coming out. Remember, proteins attracted? In this case, it's salt. If we can keep more salt here, instead of being reabsorbed, water follows, that's how diuretics work. So there are loop diuretics, because remember, we're reabsorbing salts here, that blocks that, salt stays in, more salt, more urine. Okay? There's ones in the distal tubule as well, that's why I cared that it was 100 versus 50. Okay? The third type are basically, if you inhibit aldosterone, okay, if you have aldosterone receptor antagonist, okay, in fact, let's do that. Okay, let's do where you have an aldosterone receptor antagonist. Okay, which is a diuretic, and see some of the things you might be looking for. And again, if you look online for that diuretic and look for some of these symptoms that you're looking for or counterindications, some of the things we're doing are going to come up. So we actually are giving, so we give an aldosterone receptor, I don't remember the name of the drug, and you don't have to do it as well, antagonist. So effectively, and again, it's not necessarily that aldosterone is going to go down, but the effect on this is going to go down. Okay, you're blocking aldosterone working, so that means you are reversing, right? So in a way, like I say, it's probably not right to write lower aldosterone. But the bottom line is, if you inhibit aldosterone working, what's going to happen to this principal cell? You're going to reabsorb what? Potassium, and then basically secreting sodium and H2O, okay? And by secreting sodium and H2O, what are we doing? Lower blood pressure, and doing what to urine output? Increasing urine output, because that is what it's doing. If you have high blood pressure, okay, you want to lower blood pressure, you give a diuretic. So by giving an aldosterone receptor antagonist, we're going to make sure that instead of reabsorbing that sodium, it's going to stay in the collecting duct, and therefore who's going to follow? Water. Okay? That's how diuretics work. And that's why in this case I usually like to put, the other one would be the opposite, but anything that's causing this opposite effect, sodium, the principal cells to lose, or to, I should say, excrete sodium in water, the corresponding thing is a high urine output. Okay, and that's how diuretics work, including this. And you give someone that because someone has high blood pressure, you're like, good, now we're going to control the blood pressure. But we've got to watch for a couple of things because we're not done with this, are we? If we have, besides doing that, we have this thing. We have reabsorbed potassium.
Hyperkalemia.
So you'll look at those drugs and you'll see you've got to look in that case for hyperkalemia. But it's not like the body's not trying to take care of the hyperkalemia. Who's also going to respond now to the hyperkalemia?
Type B.
See, I don't owe you guys any money because you all get this. Type B respond. Okay? So type B are going to respond to get rid of or excrete the potassium. But what are they also doing?
Increasing hydrogen.
Which is?
Metabolic acidosis.
Isn't this fun? Okay? You're reabsorbing hydrogen, therefore you have created, and that's another thing you'll look up. You'll see for that diuretic that basically you're looking for hyperkalemia, you're looking for metabolic acidosis because the body is responding this way. And you might have to tweak the drug or give her a different diuretic if that patient sort of has these things going too severe, not correcting. But of course, we're going to try to correct the metabolic acidosis, aren't we?
Yes.
How are we doing that?
Hypervent.
Now remember, we've already used, we're going to hypervent. We're going to increase respiration. Because we've already involved, once you involve, that's why that's that sort of rule here. Once you've involved one of the intercalated cells, we don't go ahead and I'll have the other one respond. It's not like it's probably not reacting, but it's simply not counteracting it, while we're doing this, or else you wouldn't have a problem. So you only involve one. So aldosterone receptor antagonist, which is a diuretic, boom, it's going to help us get rid of the water and increase urine output to lower blood pressure. But at the same time, you have to watch hyperkalemia. Also, because type B respond to hyperkalemia, you have to watch for metabolic acidosis. I don't know about the respiration, CO2 levels or whatever. We don't worry about that. But you've vowed everything once, and you're done.
What does the CA stand for on the?
It's the enzyme carbonic anhydrase, the enzyme that actually catalyzes this, that you don't really have to know. But all reactions use enzymes to actually speed it up. And that's why this enzyme, we've seen this now, and we can go backwards now. We've seen this in both of these cell types. We've seen this carbon dioxide transport. We've seen this in the cerebral spinal fluid that are controlling respiration. This is why I said at the beginning that we were just playing with this, but this is really a significant reaction and enzyme in our body for controlling carbon dioxide and therefore pH balance. Okay, very critical. We'll see it one more time when we come back from Thanksgiving, helping us get all that acid in our stomach as well. So yeah, it's a pretty big little guy there. Yeah.
Do the principal cells always respond, or is there any instance where
Unless they're not working, they're going to respond. They're going to respond to aldosterone, and they're going to respond to potassium levels as well.
so they're always going to respond in correspondence to type A and type B?
Well,
Like type A and principal, type B and principal cells?
yes. Okay, I don't know which order it's going to go, but they're always going to be, we're always going to have, because we're always involving somehow, the link is potassium, and they all involve that, we're always going to involve these and one of those. Okay, and whatever comes first, it just depends on the condition. Exactly. You're always going to have one of these, this, you're going to have, and then some sort of, respiration as well, right? And then, of course, we're involving blood pressure, the acid base, and potassium. That's why this is our life right here, our lifeline. Did someone ask a question first? Because I thought okay, go ahead.
The one thing I just need clarification, I guess, on is for the diuretics, when it causes the sodium to stay in the collecting duct, why, again, I mean, I know that the sodium will attract water, and that's why you would get like an excessive like urine
Mhm.
output. But if it's making it stay in the collecting ducts, why? would
It's
you
not
get-
staying, it means it's not being, as the filtrate is running through, usually we're reabsorbing the salt back into the body.
Okay.
It's preventing that, which means salt is staying in here
Oh,
on the
taking
way
it
out,
out.
taking water with it.
Okay.
Okay? And that's why, that's why those are the three places that you mainly have diuretics work. Are those, there's other probably ways too, but this is the way to basically do it. So you inhibit this, and sometimes there's combinations for various reasons too. Some of it to deal with these other symptoms of hyper and hypokalemia that that you might have depending on what you're doing. So, how do we feel about that? Are we ready to move backwards?
Yes.
So everybody's clear on those types of questions that I've gone so far. Two on that whole how you diagnose this, with those levels. Okay, 2 questions on that, and then I don't know exactly how many on this, but a lot of them are in order. Yeah, good luck.
It is off.
We can close the door if you're cold, or oh. I'm all warmed up. I'm playing my kidney game. Okay, I've got I don't even know what's wrong with me. Maybe I'll get another throat. Okay, so we're good. And we already know the essay questions. That's nice. Okay, Mira Costa took this test on Friday. 40% got A's. Okay, so which is a lot better than the cardiac for everybody. Cardiac was 25 to 28% or something like that. So this is a good test to really bump up. You really have, again, 200 points left, unless you take the cumulative. I don't need this anymore.
Oh, and then when you say it's in order, what do you mean? Like, you just said right now, the questions on the exam would be in order.
That
I mean,
is, like the way it's organized on that last page of your extra questions.
Okay.
Where this happens in response to this, that happens in response to that happens. That's the kind of order for the
Not
ones.
necessarily. Well, so then, is it safe to say that via chapters? Do you know what I mean? Like chapter 17?
No, not like that.
Okay.
No, I don't mean order like that. I mean when we start dealing with these questions of the game, you're going to see 4 or 5 of those in order versus some random thing.
Right. It being
You're out of what? Yeah. So that very semester, but I actually gave, especially as people do battle in cardiac, I'm like, oh god, this was hard. I'm like, okay, I'll give those 10 points, and we'll see if there's any other adjustments in that. But basically that. So basically, again, you can start to figure out what you need to get. Off the record, when I see 79 point something, 89 point something, I round up, but I have to stop somewhere. That's what sort of sucks. Because what if you're 88.8? I'm like, oh, well, where am I going to stop? So it's sort of a pain. But you sort of have when you're figuring kind of that extra point. Okay, but I have to see that number on that for people trying to get A's or B's. So hopefully we're having mostly A's and B's there, or if you just need a C to pass for some things that everyone here is going to at least get that, and that's what I'm hoping. So this test should everyone here should if you get this should do pretty well if you do that game. All right. Let's do the kidney, the rest of it. If that's what you guys want to do. Is that what you want to do, or do you want to go all the way back to respiratory? You want? Well, we can do both, but what are we going to do right now?
Let's just do the kidneys.
Okay.
Are we labeling or doing osmolarity?
Let's go ahead and I want to go ahead and go back to 19 to try to give you an idea of the basic things you want to know from 19 and what you don't have to know, and then we'll do making urine and blood pressure, control.
And then can we go back to 17, 18?
And then we'll go back to 17, 18. Assuming my voice lasts. Just don't know how many Ricola to take. This was a bad week to get sick. I've got kidney and cancer all week in my classes, and it's like I'm so excited and I can't even talk. It's like crazy.
Should drink hot tea, that helps, like chamomile and lemon.
Yeah. I need to do that. Okay. We're going back to chapter 19. Again, I'm not going, you have to know the basic anatomy. I'm not going to relabel this. We already know that. But we're going to deal with again, the main things we're dealing with, again, because I'm not going to label all this, you have to know, you look at some of the anatomy, the cortical versus, juxtamedullary nephrons, they go deep and all that. You kind of look at that, but that's all on your own. The big things are going to be filtration and control filtration, right? That's sort of the details. And so, the idea of filtration, first of all, the filtration, again, is mainly size. And so, the questions are, what makes it in and what doesn't? Well, the easiest thing to say is what doesn't make it into the filtrate? Cells and proteins. Everything else makes it in, for our purposes. There's some little things that don't, but that's basically it. Okay? They don't make it in, everything else does. And remember, as far as the proximal tubule goes, most of the water, most of the salts, all the glucose, all the amino acids there. So, no real details on that. I'm not going to actually put the transporters and primary and secondary active transport and all that. I don't feel like playing with that, and I know you don't really feel like it either. So, it's really just bulk pre-absorption of all that. So, here's the details, filtration. When we're talking filtration and we're trying to control GFR, we talk about three forces. Okay? There's a force driving the fluid in, and there's two forces which are opposing that. And so the driving force in is blood pressure, specifically in the glomerulus, which we're calling hydrostatic pressure. Because remember, you have blood pressure out here, but in a minute we're going to talk about a couple controls that even under various blood pressures, we actually try to control GFR. So the real pressure is the pressure right at the glomerulus. So it's related, but it's really that, and that's why we call that hydrostatic pressure. So, pH was it. So hydrostatic pressure is pushing it in. And all the ions, etc., because that goes through those holes. But what are the two opposing forces? The fact is there's fluid in here, right? That's pressure. And then the colloid osmotic pressure. The proteins are out here. Water is attracted to almost anything, apparently. The water is attracted to the proteins. That's colloid osmotic pressure. And the key is, when you add these up, that the hydrostatic pressure beats the two of these normally, and you have a given, which you don't need to know the number, but you'll have a net flow that contributes to that GFR. GFR, the glomerular filtration rate, sometimes is measured in liters per day. How many liters per day go through?
160.
180. 180 liters a day. How many liters of plasma do we have? So basically, how many times a day does our entire blood supply go? 60 times a day. It's a lot of fluid. Okay, liver failure. We always like liver failure, don't we? Now this question should be old hat to us overall, but liver failure, we want to, and again, you don't want to just sort of get to, okay, that, the answer might include GFR, but we might have some of the other words in between, because obviously there's a step-by-step thing. And so liver failure means what? You're not producing some of these proteins out here. We call that hypoproteinemia. Because who knows, maybe that's in part of the multiple choice. We don't know what's there, so we want to write all these answers down. Okay? If you have, which we figured out, it's hypoproteinemia. If you have hypoproteinemia, your next question is, what does that affect? The colon osmotic pressure. Okay? It's not affecting those. And what is it doing to the colon osmotic pressure? Okay? There's less here. So it decreases colon osmotic pressure because there's less proteins. And therefore, if you have less opposing, GFR is increasing. And so, again, I don't know what the answer is because I don't know what the multiple choice are. But basically, these are the three things that you have to associate with it that you just wrote down and look for the correct answer if they have both of them. It's hypoproteinemia, causing a lower in colon osmotic pressure, and therefore with less pressure pushing it out, GFR is increasing.
Is the hyperproteinemia just not many proteins just hang out in the blood?
It means the liver's not synthesizing all those proteins, and we don't have as much of them. Okay? You know, these are the albumin, all the liver proteins. We did that for when we controlled. It was the same idea when we had this interstitial fluid versus the blood. We had proteins here. That was controlling, again, how much fluid stayed in the blood versus going to the tissues. And when we had liver failure there, again, not enough forcing in, we had edema going to the tissues. It's the exact same principle here, but now we actually have it going into this compartment. Is that question coming? Or?
Yeah. Was it fluid in the Bowman's capsule? Is that where? Because there's hydrostatic going this way, and it's going through the glomerulus.
Into Bowman's capsule.
Right.
Right.
So the fluid in the Bowman's capsule is pushing against it.
Yeah, well, it's the whole thing, though. But right, I mean,
Yeah.
directly, it is the fluid pressure right at the Bowman's capsule side of things. Exactly.
But all the rest of this stuff is going through the glomerulus, like the blood.
The blood is going through the glomerulus. It's being squeezed in, whatever the net flow, and then everything else, the cells and the rest of the fluid, because we're only getting some, is continuing on.
And then just to clear up the colon pressure,
Mm-hmm.
if we have less are you saying because there's like salt?
Colon osmotic pressure refers to protein. Okay? Because remember, salts were like equalizing, right? Because salts go through. So, the colon osmotic pressure, because that's like what we did back in, for the flow from blood to interstitial fluid is the same way. Because proteins don't make it in, these liver proteins, there's an attractive force for the water that opposes the pressure going in. Because proteins, like salts, attract water. In this case, again, the salts are going in both directions, so that's not affecting water flow or water distribution. But the proteins stay out here, that attracts them back, and that's colon osmotic pressure. And if you have less proteins because of liver failure, that means that value is smaller, and therefore GFR will increase.
If you have a decreasing blood pressure, is it going to change the GFR?
Well, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
Because we have control over that. Those are going to be the two local controls. So, not necessarily. Yes, ma'am, back there.
For the fluid pressure, is there anything that really affects that? Like proteins affect the colon osmotic?
Does anything affect the blood pressure?
The fluid.
The fluid, you could say, and I don't think I put it on this test, my favorite, kidney stone. If I mean, there could be other things as well, but if you have kidney stones blocking these tubules, in that calyx region, your pressure is going to tend to build up there, and that could affect it as well, and then lower GFR. And, I have some pictures. I think I put the kidney thing on for fun. Some of those things were huge. Okay, some of them aren't that small, and then you can really see it actually affecting that pressure, and therefore decreasing GFR by having too much pressure on the inside. But I didn't put it on this test. But it's a good question. Okay? Okay, the other thing, and that's the end of this chapter, then we go to 20. The other real thing were two local controls. I don't care about systemic. Two local controls of GFR. Okay? One of them was, and this relates to your question, that if you look back at this thing, it was something like this, GFR remains constant, this is GFR, under a wide range of blood pressure, because we want to control, even though blood pressure is varying, we want to control GFR. A lot of it's going to be the same way that we control blood flow into tissues. We're only dealing with afferent. We're not even dealing with efferent because it's crazy. So for afferent, the idea is if blood pressure is increasing, that means we're going to be stretching. As blood goes in, these afferent arterioles made of smooth muscle, and the reaction will be constriction. Okay, we called that myogenic autoregulation before. This is called the myogenic response. That's myo meaning muscle. Smooth muscle reacts that way. When it stretches, calcium comes in, it constricts. That's gonna, just like for active hyperemia, for the myogenic autoregulation, we control blood flow into the tissue. This is going to control, GFR. It's going to control pressure in here. So that's the myogenic response. Okay, an increase in pressure is going to cause constriction and therefore control blood pressure. So, and that works for a huge range. If your blood pressure goes way high, then you're going to have this whole barrier break down. If it's too low, we are going to shut the whole thing off to keep blood going in the brain. But we're not dealing with that. The second one, the JG. All right, so we clear this thing up a bit. And so we have there's a better figure in the book, and you can look at it. The juxtaglomerular response means that this ascending arterial, ascending loop of Henle, ascending limb, right here, okay, it's actually going to wrap here in between the afferent and efferent arterial. Okay. And these cells, which I'm drawing there, basically sense flow. So in the ascending limb, there are specialized cells of the ascending limb which detect salt flow through. And these specialized cells are the macula densa. Okay? And in this case, that's what I'm drawing here. Because that's really where they are. So they're detecting, sodium flow through this region, which means it's going to be directly proportional to GFR. If GFR is increasing, sodium flow is increasing. And what do we want to do to GFR then? Decrease it. And so how it's going to do this, that's why it's wrapped around here, is you don't need to know the specific signals, because even I didn't really list them here. The macula densa are going to signal to these granular cells, which are familiar to us now. They're going to send signals to the afferent arterial to constrict. And therefore, lower pressure, lower GFR. So remember, none of this is assay and all that. You just have to know these basic, the basic controls here. One is simply myogenic response. Increase in blood pressure causes constriction. We're only dealing with afferent here. The other is the juxtaglomerular response. You got to remember that it's the cells of the ascending limb that are the macula densa. They sense sodium flow, and again, they just communicate to the granular cells, and they'll communicate to cause constriction to the arterioles. No, it's paracrine signaling. So it's actually some signal molecules which gets released and binds to those cells and bind to those cells.
I missed the part. Is it going to decrease GFR?
And then it would decrease GFR because it's going to cause constriction. If you constrict, less pressure, less GFR. So those are two local controls. The systemic ones we're not dealing with at all, even though I have a page on it. That's my own.
Can the macula densa also increase blood pressure?
It's the same idea that if it's, that you have this basal level of signals going on here, and so if all of a sudden that decreases, there's going to be less of these signals going, and therefore, yeah. So
But it doesn't connect with
it doesn't what?
It doesn't constrict.
We're just not talking about the efferent. Because it's crazy. The efferent, it's just too much to talk about.
Did you say no sympathetic and hormonal control?
We're not going to be correct. It's not going to be tested. Because the next chapter, which we're going to get to now, is when we really deal a little more with the hormonal control. But no, I don't want to complicate it. The rest of chapter 19, remember I talked a little about clearance. There's no questions on the test about it, so if you don't understand it, you can still not understand it the next time. And there's really nothing else in the chapter besides this, right? So ready, chapter 20. And we've done half of it.
One more thing before we move on real quick. For the macula densa, the cells of the ascending limb will signal to the granular cells in the arterial to constrict, resulting in lowered.
Yes. Right.
Just want to confirm.
Yeah, you've confirmed. Okay, so while we're doing this, I'm going to put this over here too, because really what we're going to do is go through what's happening in each segment to create this gradient, and then we're going to use those hormones, to control water flow. And the main thing that we haven't done that we'll put it is, again, it's simple now compared to what we did. We'll have that idea of low blood pressure, high BP, low osmolarity, high osmolarity. Okay? And again, we'll put aldosterone and the ADH in there. Let's clear this up. So, now we're dealing with the long loops of Henle. Okay? The 20% of all the nephrons, the one that go deep into the medulla, they're responsible for making concentrated, being able to concentrate our urine up to 1200. And so the first thing to sort of do, and then we're going to follow this, is again, just to list the osmolarities that we're finding as we go through here. So the blood is approximately 300 that we're filtering in. Okay, in Bowman's capsule, we're still getting, okay, even somehow after all this bulk reabsorption, guess what? We're still at 300. Okay, so this stays at 300. Okay, that's the proximal tubule. Now we go into what the long loops of Henle do. And remember, the long loops of Henle are going to what? Create, and we're going to show you how, this vertical osmotic gradient. We're going to kind of show you how. Create. Create. Okay? The vertical osmotic gradient, VOG. I mean, just for that. Okay, this is how it works. So to follow this, you're going to have to basically see a couple things. What happens in each segment, and particular noting water. Can water always go through? Can water never go through? Is water controlled by hormones? Those are the three things you're thinking about as far as knowing what the questions are going to be, etc. As we descend, what are we doing? We're reabsorbing water. Remember, as we're coming out of the tubule, you see it's sort of in the interstitial fluid, but we've got blood vessels running through, bringing it back to the body. We are reabsorbing it. We just can't draw 1 million blood vessels here, right? It's sort of hard. But we're reabsorbing water, but we're not reabsorbing salt. And so what's happening to the concentration of the filtrate? Until we get to 1200, which is the highest we can get. Okay? Because we're getting rid of water, we're concentrating the salt. Okay? That's the descending. On the ascending, what are we doing? We're reabsorbing salt. You don't need to look at the specific transporters when you look at them. I'm not going to draw those. But you're reabsorbing sodium, potassium chloride again, so we're accumulating salt out here. Of course, water looks and wants to follow. Can it follow? Okay, what if I throw ADH on there? Never. Okay? There are no aquaporins in the ascending limb, okay, of the loop of Henle. So H2O cannot leave. Okay? No of these water channels, which are called aquaporins, which we don't talk too much about until now. We just say water goes through the membrane, but really they use aquaporins, especially for when a lot of water flow like we're doing. So if we are pumping out salt, and now we sort of see the significance too as far as if we're not, but if we're reabsorbing salt, pumping it out, and water can't follow, what is happening to the concentration of the filtrate? It's less. Again. And in fact, if you look at the very top, okay, which is going to be now going to the distal tubule, it's at 100. So if you look at this, we're pumping out water, we're pumping out salt. If you look at these numbers, each time we pass, we end up accumulating salt, right? We started with this filter being 300. We passed once, it's only 100, so some salt must have went out there. We do it again, more salt went out there. And so we are building up this gradient. Now, if you look at sort of the video and maybe the couple slides I put, because I'm not really explaining why it's creating a vertical one, because it's sort of complicated, and I don't want you don't have to know that, but you realize it's basically pumping out salt. So by a method which we're not going to describe, this pumping out salt actually creates this gradient of salt, which is actually vertical. Okay? So that this represents deep into the medulla, this is less, this is less, this is less. Okay? So again, you look at this before we move on. You have the long loops of Henle. They're going to create the vertical osmotic gradient by the following. During the descending limb, we're pumping out water, concentrating the filtrate to 1200. Okay? On the ascending limb, we are pumping out salt, no aquaporins, water can't follow, so that at the top of it we have 100, but now each time we're accumulating salt until we form this gradient. Okay? The other thing, again, was the idea that, and I've already mentioned why, during part of the distal tubule here, we're also pumping out salt. That's why diuretics work there too. So that when we get to the end of the distal tubule, top of the collecting duct, it's 50. When you get to the bottom of the collecting duct, what is it?
50.
Anywhere between very dilute, 50, all the way up to 1200 milliosmol if we really need that water to go back to the body. Okay? So, okay, and again, if you look at this 50, okay, which is mostly water, it sees all the salt out here and it wants to go. Can it just go? Can it just freely diffuse by osmosis? It needs an invitation. Who's inviting it? ADH. Okay? So the idea is that this segment, the collecting duct, is under hormonal control. And specifically, collecting duct is ADH. We'll get back to that fine-tuning of salt and water up here with aldosterone, which we already had up there at the top here. But here we're dealing with this. So, oh, wait a minute. I've almost destroyed it. We made a gradient, but did we maintain it? Not yet. Okay? I skip ahead. I go back. The long loop eventually created this vertical osmotic gradient, okay, by doing this this multiplier thing you see. Now, do we want, when we're still passing, filter through, do we want more water now to leave and start diluting out this gradient? No. We need something to maintain okay? Who's going to maintain it? The vasorectum. Okay? The way it does, again, you don't need to know crazy stuff about this. It's not because it's not an essay type thing, but the way it's doing it is it runs counter current to it. And you look at the picture in the book, the bottom line is since it's running counter current, again, it's blood, it's starting at 300, it's picking up salt that's being pumped out on the ascending, so that now it's at 1200. As it ascends now, the water gets sucked up, because this is a huge osmotic party back to the body. So instead of the water sort of destroying the gradient, okay, diluting it out, all this water that's coming is going to be picked up. So literally, we're picking up the salt and then sucking up the water, so that, we're back at 300 again to go back up. But now we're not going to mess up the gradients at all. Without the vasorecta, we're not going to be able to form a gradient. Okay? And again, if we can't form a gradient, so if we have no vasorecta, we can't form a gradient, are we going to be able to concentrate our urine? No. I don't know what it might be. It might all be 300. We get it to 300. The reason we can concentrate this all the way up to 1200 is because of this gradient. the long loops of Henle create this gradient, as we described. The base recta is important to maintain the gradient, or else it gets lost. Again, hormonal control, ADH. The key with ADH is that, of course, we already know it's water reabsorption, that why we made the gradient in the first place is the following. That the top of the collecting duct are more sensitive to ADH than the receptors below or on. So if we need a little water, let's say we produce a little ADH, we're only, and you don't even know the mechanism, we're only going to insert aquaporins at the top. So that some water will get reabsorbed, and now we'll equilibrate the filter with whatever corresponds to that level of gradient. So maybe now we're coming out at 300. Okay? So a little more concentrated, we got some more water in our body. If we need more, we'll produce more ADH. Okay? Now these cells are sensitive enough for that level, they're going to start inserting aquaporins. More water gets reabsorbed, and maybe we're at 600. The most we can do, will be to, when you have high levels of ADH, that'll be enough to insert them all the way down, but the most we can concentrate then to equilibrate is 1200, and that's the idea. So it's under hormonal control. The more ADH, then the lower sort of on this collecting duct that we insert aquaporins, more water gets reabsorbed, and that's why we needed this osmotic gradient. If we just had one level here, 300 or whatever, you could concentrate it to 300. That's it. Okay, 50 or 300. We don't like that, right? We want to be able to fine tune it anywhere between 50 and 1200 by this process of hormonal control. So again, water, always, 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 never hormonal control.
And in the distal tubule, there's no aquaporins either in the first half?
In the first half, so this one's sort of, mixed. But when we're really talking never, we're talking this, we're talking hormonal control, we're talking this. Kind of ignoring that because it's already sort of, most of it you don't have them. We're almost done with the kidney. Really, after we do this, we're done with the kidney. And we take a little break for a few minutes so I can do my voice and we can do the respiratory system. So besides the whole RA pathway, and this is almost going backwards, you really need to know this to answer some easy questions. I'll have ones, you have high osmolarity, what are these levels? And so, again, these make a lot more sense than these. Whenever I'm doing osmolarity, I like to, on my paper, draw. So I really kind of remember what it is. So low osmolarity, it's less out here. High osmolarity, it's more out here. But we do low blood pressure first. Okay? ADH means what to us? And aldosterone, sodium reabsorption, water follows. So if we have low blood pressure, up or down? Up or down? Okay, who's controlling that? Renin, we got that whole thing. Obviously, more H2O reabsorbed. Again, this is old hat to us now. Sodium and water. Okay, so you have that. So you always know that. For high blood pressure, again, one was sort of one signal. Atrial natriuretic peptide goes up. Therefore, okay, less reabsorption of these, more secretion to remember, these are in response. Okay, this is associated with high blood pressure. It's like when you have low blood pressure, this is going to be happen. All these are going to be produced as a goal to raise blood pressure, right? That's why you increase water and salt retention, to raise it back up. High blood pressure, we want to get rid of it. We lower ADH and aldosterone, and water and salt go out to lower. Those they go together. That's what happens most, right? These ones are going to be in oppositions. And all you have to ask is, what you want to happen here? If you're dilute 270, ADH is water. Do you want more water there? Do you want more water out here?
No.
That would dilute it more, right? How about throwing a little salt there?
Yes.
Yes. Water will follow later. Don't worry about it. Okay? But salt will beat them back up. In this case, 330, do you want some water to dilute it out? But you don't want more salt. They work in opposition.
Could you explain what the 270 is, like where in the nephron you're talking?
It's not, this is not nephron at all, okay? What we're saying here, these are, you know, these are the fluids surrounding our cells, okay? What is the osmolarity of our blood and interstitial fluid surrounding the cells? And the kidney is going to react to this. So if you have, you know, where you diluted out your blood, okay, let's say these are red blood cells, so you only have 270 out here, you know, you sweat it out and drink all pure water, you know, as blood's going through the kidney, it's going to react to this and saying, look, that's going to cause our cells to blow up, so we're going to react, have lower, produce more aldosterone, so that as it's passing through, we're going to get some excess salt back to put more salt there, try to make it 300. Okay. The opposite here, if you, again, you know, ate 10 bags of chips, that means you've got all the salt out here, which could be dehydrating your cells. And so as that's happening, basically, it's going to be, we're going to reabsorb more water to try to dilute out that salt. You know, then we'll deal with blood pressure later, right? But we don't want your cells to dehydrate.
What would you title this? Like, kidney's response to
High and low blood pressure or high and low osmolarity, yeah.
Okay.
Again, remember, not an essay, but you're going to probably have it on there to answer the multiple choice. That's pretty good. Any kidney questions? Okay, I need a couple minutes, and then we will do, you know, we might go backwards and do 18 and look at 17 a little bit, see what extra questions. All the answers to the extra questions are online as well, but, you know, I can help people with that as well. So take 5 minutes or so I can rest my voice. That means don't ask me anything right now. Don't come up here.
I have all this.